ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Influential Muslim, brought to you by the Islamic Literary Society. Before I introduce the professor, we have mashallah, an expert in Bediuzzaman, Shaykh Bediuzzaman's life and work. I want to make a few primary disclaimer as well. Now, ILS does not promote each and every view held by those thinkers and those writers and intellectuals. It is just to give a taste to their life so that we can inspire to be like them overall. But there may be a case or opinion or discussion within the work and within the subject that may not necessarily represent the, if I may use the word, orthodox Islam or within the Sunni framework. So we don't promote everything the author says, or the person that we are talking about. It is just to give glimpse into their life so that we can appreciate it. And this project is it only promotes that which is in agreement with the primary text of Islam and within the understanding of the early Muslim. I want to make that clear. So having said that, I like to introduce Professor Zeki. The professor is currently teaching at the Department of Theology and Religious Study at John Carroll University, right?
John Carroll University.
He earned his PhD in Turkey from University of Marmara, an MA in Islamic Theology and Philosophy, and BA in Islamic Theology and Law. His published work is Islamic Jesus, Dajjal in Islamic Creed, Encyclopedia of Companion of the Prophet ﷺ, Volume 1 and 2. So having said that, yes, welcome to the show and thank you for your time, Dr. Zeki.
Thank you, Brother Abdul Hai. So, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, today we'll be talking about the life of Bediuzzaman Said Nursi. I put Shaykh at the top of it, Shaykh Said Nursi, because Brother Abdul Hai used that term and I didn't want to break his heart. I said, I'm going to use that term. Generally, he is known as Allama, which means great scholar. And his title is Bediuzzaman, which means the wonder of the age, given to him by his teachers when he was very young. So who is Said Nursi? He lived from 1876 to 1960. So he was born in 1876 and he died in 1960. Probably he is one of the few people who lived the most catastrophic events in human history in the recent centuries, the recent 2 centuries, 20th and 21st century. Born in the small village of Nursi in the province of Bitlis in eastern Anatolia, his village is called Nursi. That's why sometimes when you say Nursi in Arabic, it's hard for Arab brothers and sisters to pronounce. They say Nursi. Actually, it is Nursi. Nursi. It's like a nur, light. His family were very pious farmers. His father was a mystic. He was a Sufi, a person who would be belonging to Tasawwuf, and very pious, to the extent that there is a story about their life that actually hints at some level of piety in this family. his father would tie the mouth of his cows when he would come back from his farm, so that his cows would not eat anything from other people's farm, because it is haram, because it is not allowed to eat from other people's properties, to attack other people's properties, to transgress on other people's properties. So he would say, yes, these are cows, but I can prevent them from eating from other people's farms. And therefore he would tie them, he would tie their mouth, he would cover their mouth, and then when he would arrive home, he would allow them to eat from what they have at home. When they asked him about this, he said, because I don't want to have any haram income, any haram food that is coming to the throat of my children. And Said Nursi was growing in this family. So that's why his mother is his father is known as Sufi Mirza. Mirza is a name used in the area, and probably in Persian originally Persian language. Maybe in other languages, in Ottoman language also it is used, in other languages it is used. His mother was Nuriya related to light again. After learning the Quran and some basic Islamic knowledge at home, Nursi went to the local madrasa, but only for 3 months. So he learned something from his brother. His elder brother his name was Abdullah. So his brother taught him something, but then he started to wonder about the studies in the madrasa system. He was quick. He just wanted to go and learn what is there. And he attended several madrasas. Madrasa, as you know, it's like schools in the official schools in the Ottoman time. They were like Ottoman style of education. And especially madrasas are in the Eastern Anatolia was very common, and generally funded by the people of the village or the city. And students will go there voluntarily and learn there. So Nursi attended those schools. But he said, I cannot stay for a long time, because traditionally the madrasa school system is continuing for 9 years. So he said, I don't have time to stay for 9 years and study all these books. It is narrated that he asked his teachers to teach him the beginning of each book that they are using as a textbook. So he said, give me the beginning, and then I will take care of the rest. Just the first chapter or the first few pages of the book, and then I will continue and then learn on my own. And that's why he had this in 3 months. So he continued for 3 months only, the madrasa system of the time. It is known that he memorized many books. Some have said, actually some of his biographers are saying that he memorized 80 books, including some major dictionaries. Qamus, for example, Qamus al-Muhit. The reason he would memorize, he would say, there might be a time that I will not have enough books as a reference, and therefore I am memorizing all these books. And the reason he would say why I memorized this Qamus, the famous dictionary, because it gives different meanings of one word. So I like to know how many meanings are happening for one word. So his title, Bediuzzaman, it can be translated as the peerless of the time. Why this is given to him? A title given to him by his teachers for two reasons. There is a story actually of this. On one occasion, he visits one of his former teachers, and his teacher wants to test him. And he says, read this page of this book for me. So he gives him a book, and then he says, open the book. And Nursi opens the book, and then he says, read it for me. And Nursi reads all the page. And then he says, close the book. And Nursi closes the book. And then he says, tell me what was in that page. Tell me what you were able to capture from what was in that page. And Nursi just read the whole page from his memory. And he says, that is unbelievable. You have an unbelievable level of memorization. It's known as photographic memory. So Nursi had that capacity, that has a capability. He said, the teacher said, well, you are very good in memorization. How about in analytical explanation? Tell me, explain to me what is meant in that page. You know, the concept that is probably the most important aspects of the concept of that page. Tell me about that. And Nursi analyzes what is that beautifully. And then this famous teacher says, the ability of memorization and the ability of analytical explanation is not found in everyone. It is very unique situation. So from now on, I call you Bediuzzaman, the wonder of the age. You are very unique. You have unique memorization ability and unique analytical ability. And then it became his title. Actually, other scholars are giving him that title. They are calling him with that title. Although he says, actually, I'm not supposed to be called Bediuzzaman. Actually, I am supposed to be called Gharibuzzaman. I am Gharib in this age. I am supposed to be called Gharibuzzaman because his style was Gharib, was strange. His clothing was strange. His type was strange. So he says, actually, I am Gharibuzzaman, not Bediuzzaman. He would say later in his life. So basic philosophy of Nursi, he wrote many books in his Masnavi. Masnavi is one of the earlier books in his life. It is to a certain extent similar to Rumi's Masnavi, namely because they have the same name, but Rumi's Masnavi is known as Masnawi Sharif. Nursi's Masnavi is called Al-Masnawi al-Arabi al-Nuri, the Arabic Masnavi of Nuri related to Nursi. So he says in one of his writings, this Masnavi is the seeds of my later work will be called Rasail al-Nur, the treatises of light. So Masnavi is like a seed book, actually. Seed book for the future collections of Nursi's writings. So this is like a philosophy of his life. He says, in 30 years of my life, of learning in my life, I learned only 4 phrases. That's it. In 30 years, I studied, I learned. but the things that I learned actually are these things. 4 phrases. First, I am not the owner of myself. It's a very important principle. Allah is the owner of your life. Allah is the owner. I am not the owner of myself. Second, death is real. It is once death comes, that is the end. The end of this life in this world. The new life starts. The afterlife starts. And in another statement, he says, if you want nasiha, if you want an advice, death is sufficient. That is so real and so important lesson for all human beings. And the third phrase, my Lord is one. There is only one God. Lord, Allah is one. And when you have only one Lord, you do not ask others. You ask one. You return to one. You seek one. You love one, and etc. So he says actually later in his books, describing these concepts, like when he describes La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumit. It goes on. He describes La ilaha illallah so beautifully. I try to elaborate on his description in my book, Islamic Spirituality, Theology and Practice for the Modern World. So beautifully describing the word La ilaha illallah. What is the meaning of La ilaha illallah? Do not turn to anything other than Allah. So it's remarkable. And that's why he says, my Lord is one. It's simple. However, it's so heavy with meanings. And the fourth phrase, the self, ana, he says ana as you know in Arabic, ego, is a criterion to understand the attributes of God. So he explains this again in his book, Al-Kalimat, Sözler in Turkish, the words. By the way, his books are written originally in Ottoman language, Turkish Ottoman language. Many of them were written in, earlier books were written in Arabic. Later, he wrote in Turkish Ottoman language. And then they are translated into a variety of languages. Probably some of them maybe into 30 languages. So they are all available in Arabic. All his books are available in Arabic, beautifully translated into Arabic. And some of them even in Urdu, some of them in Gujarat, and many of them also in English. I think many of them, maybe all of them, are available in English too. So this is explained in his book, Sözler, the words with capital W, the words is the title of his book, that ego is a criteria. So you use yourself with your attributes as a way of understanding the attributes of God. So you say, I have knowledge, but my knowledge is limited. Allah has the unlimited knowledge. So Allah has given me this knowledge so that I will understand the unlimited knowledge of God. If I didn't have knowledge at all, I will not be able to understand the nature of knowledge. So to a certain extent, you have power, but your power is very limited. So with this limited power, you understand the unlimited power of God, the unlimited. So for him, for God to just move the entire planet is not more difficult than moving a baseball. It's so easy for God. So that's the power of God is unlimited. There is no measurement for the power of God. Human beings' power is limited, is measured. And that's why ego is actually a criterion to understand the attributes of God. He had very big dream to establish a university in his early life. He thought that the problem of the Islamic world is the lack of education, and especially in his own area, in the area of Eastern Anatolia of the time, because his region was called, the general region in the Ottoman time was called Kurdistan. So Bediuzzaman was from that area, and he said the problem is the lack of education. We have strong intellect, but our intellect is not used. So if there is a venue of education, these people will grow and will become very, very much effective and beneficial. So his intention was to have a university in this area, which is the eastern part of Anatolia in modern-day Turkey. And this university will address Muslims in Persia, in Pakistan, in India, and then will address Muslims in Caucasus, in Russia, and then will address Muslims in different places. He says will be like Al-Azhar University in Africa. This will be like the sister of Al-Azhar University in Africa. And for this reason, he went to Istanbul, all the way from Eastern Anatolia to Istanbul, according to the transportation vehicles of the time. It was not easy to go all the way to Istanbul. And he requested to meet with Abdul Hamid II, the Sultan, the Ottoman Sultan, and he met with him. He explained his project to him. Abdul Hamid liked the project, but somehow it didn't work. Abdul Hamid offered him salary. And probably the mediators misrepresented Bediuzzaman to him. And that's why he didn't think of the seriousness of issue, probably, or he didn't understand, because Bediuzzaman will address Abdul Hamid, will say, instead of spending money on the palace of Yıldız, Yıldız is a palace there, it's like a big palace in Istanbul, still it is there. Instead of spending money on the palace of Yıldız, Yıldız means star actually in Turkish, spend money on the education of people, not on the palace. And maybe because of this, maybe for other reasons, Nursi probably didn't receive what he wanted. Instead, they wanted to give him a salary. And salary, like you are a scholar, you need money, let's give you a salary. And Nursi rejected salary. And he said, I didn't come to ask for salary. I am not a beggar. I came to ask for the education of my people. And they said probably Nursi, Said Nursi, at that time it was called Said Kurdi, because his origin comes from Kurdish background. Said Kurdi probably is a crazy person, is probably mentally sick. Because how come you don't accept the salary of the Sultan, the salary that is given to you by the Sultan? And they put him in mental health hospital. It's unbelievable. And 3 doctors with this diagnose his disease, and he says, please let me tell you what is my disease, and then you decide, because it is the job of patients to explain to the doctors what they have. And then he explained his situation to the doctors, 3 doctors. And doctors put a report. If Said Nursi is mentally sick, there is no healthy person on earth. There is no mentally healthy person on earth. So this person is not mentally sick. This person has an idea, has a project, but people don't understand his project. People who were mediating between Abdul Hamid and Nursi. So he called this university Madrasatul Zahra, but he didn't give up. Later, after Abdul Hamid II, Sultan Rashad came to power. And Said Nursi explained his project to Sultan Rashad too. He said, your predecessor didn't accept it, but I will tell this to you too. And Sultan Rashad accepted and really fascinated by this project, dedicated certain amount of money for this project. And then Nursi went and actually started the foundation of the project that will be Madrasatu Zahra, or Zahra University. Basically, that's what later he would call. But then, unfortunately, the First World War prevented Nursi from fulfilling his project. So the First World War became an obstacle to fulfill this project, and it didn't go through. But then he says, with Allah's help, my later writings, which is called the Rasail al-Nur, the Treatises of Light, will be an open university. All people will read these books and will benefit as they are benefiting from a university. So I'm also looking at my time to make sure that we are not passing our time. This is one principle that he put in his education in this school. He said, this university should be a place where modern sciences are taught as well as religious sciences. Not only religious sciences, modern sciences. When he said modern sciences, of course, he was very much fascinated by modern sciences. He would say, Aferin, ulumu jadide. Blessed are, the new sciences. He was very much pro-modern sciences. And he would say, there is no dichotomy between the Quran and science. The Quran is encouraging science. So why he would say this? Why this was his idea? Why this was his major principle? Because he says, the light of conscience is the sciences of religion. Conscience. If you don't have a religion in your heart, conscience becomes, basically conscience needs religion. That is the point he wants to make. And the light of the mind is natural sciences. By bringing these two lights together, the truth will come out. If religion and science come together, the truth will come out. Lack of the modern sciences causes fanaticism. If a person has only religious sciences, that probably will cause fanaticism. He will not believe in many things that modern sciences are saying. And the lack of religious sciences causes skepticism. So whenever there is lack of religious sciences, there will be skepticism there. You say there are angels, they will say, well, I have doubt about angels. Can we put them in laboratory? No, you cannot put angels in laboratory and prove it. So that is the area of religious science. And the other one also is fanaticism. You say something about, let's say, very basic in modern sciences, but if there is no any sense of it and a person doesn't have any sense of it, then this person will say, no, that is not true, I don't see it. Or like the moon is light, well, there's no way to go to the moon. It's impossible. The Quran says the moon is light. This is fanaticism. Science shows something, and very clear in science, but Nursi says, if you don't have any sense of modern sciences, the fanaticism will come as a result of that. Okay, that's why I think I mentioned this, no dichotomy between science and religion. He praises modern sciences. For him, there are two books of God. For Nursi, there are two books of God. The revealed and the created book. The revealed book or the revealed books would be the scriptures, the final of which will be the Holy Quran. And the created book of God is the world of nature. The created book of God. So that's called the world of nature. So for Nursi, nature is a book. And actually, if you have time, I wrote a short article in that regard. It's called Nature, a Book to be Contemplated. It's a very short article, very easy read, published a long time ago. Okay. And when he speaks of Islam, he gave a talk at the Damascus mosque, Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, I think in 1911. And then he speaks of the enemies of Islam. Scholars asked him to give khutbah, to give a sermon on Friday prayer, and it's believed that there were about 10,000 people, and Nursi addressed these people and maybe about 100 scholars, and he mentioned many things, the diseases of the Islamic world and the solutions for them. This was published in a book called Al-Khutbatu Shamiyya. If you have time, you can read that book. And translated into English as the Damascus Sermon. The Damascus Sermon. We had actually a conference on this book at John Carroll University in 2011 on the occasion of the centennial event of the Damascus Sermon. So here he says, the enemies of the Islamic world are three things. You know, people are talking about this country is the enemy, that country is the enemy. Nursi doesn't talk about that. He says the enemy of the Islamic world, first, is ignorance. Second, poverty. Third, discord, disunity. So he says, we have to fight these enemies with knowledge to defeat ignorance, establishing schools, learning. Poverty, to have art. He says art is probably the way that variety of aspects of art that can develop business, and business can overcome poverty. And discord, as a response to that, he says unity. Through unity, we will be able to overcome discord. And this way, we will solve the problem of the Islamic world. That is the main enemies of Islam, he says. Now, Nursi lived through three distinct periods: the Sultanate, constitutionalism, and republicanism. In an era, he was well, under the Ottoman Empire, he was very prominent. Under the constitutionalism, he supported democracy, constitutionalism. That is the law, the rule of law. It's constitutionalism at that time was another name for democracy, and he would say freedom. Freedom. He would say, I can survive without bread, but I cannot survive without freedom. That's a very famous statement of Nursi. So then the era of Turkish Republic came, and the Turkish Republic of the time thought of Nursi as a threat because he was so much prominent. Of course, we don't have time to elaborate on all aspects of his life, but basically, he was prevented from his writing. He was exiled, and then he started to write his books in exile in a very difficult situation. He didn't have library, he didn't have anything. But the books that he memorized became really his reference. He said, those books became my reference from my memorization. And that's why he wrote a book on the miracles of the Prophet of Islam. It is called the Mu'jizatul Ahmadiyya, and he narrates all this chain of narration. One of my colleagues who did study on it, he says, I'm surprised that I didn't find any wrong chain of narration. How you memorize all of this? So probably in the early time when he memorized all those hadith were in his memory. So he had photographic memory. Nursi very much supported nonviolence. Even the government, put him in jail, but he always was pro nonviolence. When he would ask about his reaction, he would say, "Our job is to work as a volunteer of servants of safety, volunteer civil servants of safety." In Turkish, asayiş memurları. We should serve the safety of people, not make life of people in danger. And then he says, I thought of this, why I am so much pro nonviolence, because violence will cause the transgression on the rights of innocents, children, women. Even if you don't agree with some policies, you can express your ideas, but in a non-violent way. Nursi's suggestion was very powerful. With that regard, I wrote an article also on that. Brother Abdul Hayy in the beginning said, I hope you will read more. Inshallah, we will read more of these writings about Nursi. He called Musbat Harakat, positive action. Our job is to do positive action, not destructive actions. Positive. Do positive things so that you will be spreading beauty and positivity and not negativity. That's his statement. It is believed that this is his last statement in his last letter to his students. Dear brothers, our duty is to do positive action and not negative action. It is to serve faith in accordance with what pleases God. We should not interfere with the duty of God. We must respond to all the difficulties we face during our service to faith with patience and thankfulness. Yes, you will face difficulties, but be thankful to God and be patient. Such a service will protect society from disorder. So the order of society, the protection of society was very important principle for Nursi. And that's why all his students were always pro-social order. They would not cause any anarchy, any negative action, even they were persecuted. And in fact, Nursi himself says, if they poison me and I die, I ask my students not to take my revenge. Allah's punishment in the afterlife is sufficient for those who are poisoning me. So he would again ask for non-violent action. His writings into two periods, Old Said and New Said. Major Old Said periods were introduction to his proposed commentary of the Quran, another book in the early time called Isharat al-Ijaz, the Science of Miraculousness of the Quran. It's a short commentary of Surah Al-Fatiha and first verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. And Masnavi Nuriya, I mentioned that it's called, translated as the Couplets of Light. Later writing, he called the Treatises of Light. And the Treatises of Light basically are his major writings. Rasail al-Nur or Risale-i-Nur, the Treatise of Light or the Treatises of Light. It is about the truth of faith, Haqa'iq al-Imaniyah. And the second part is about court defenses, because he would go to the court and he would defend his case. There are many, probably more than 2,000 times he was acquitted in the court. And then lahikalar, appendices, These are his correspondence with his students. He would send letters to his students and instruct them, how to act, how to do. So these are called lahikalar or appendices. And then I think I mentioned briefly about this book the words sözler, mektubat, lemalar, and shu'alar. And Nursi answers many questions on Islam. The total of this, I think the total of his books is about 6,000 pages. And Nursi, the picture that I put here is actually the picture of Kulliyatu Rasail al-Nur, Kulliyatu Rasail al-Nur, the collection of the treatises of light. So all of them is about 6,000 pages. Okay, let's see what else we have. I think I will stop here and then ask for QA, your questions.
Either ask the professor a question directly, or they can write it down, or whatever makes, whatever is comfortable. Please ask him the question that is relevant to the topic so that we can get most out of the session. Dr. Zeki, if I can perhaps start with while you are doing the presentation, I wrote down a few questions that I have in my mind. If we start off with the larger question, what does Sayyid Nursi mean for today's society, today's Turks? In other words, I'll put question 1 and 2 together.
Yes.
To what extent does Nursi's theological position, his influences, penetrate into the Turkish society as we have it now?
What does Nursi mean for today's society? It's a very good question. It's a wonderful question. So I think one of the most important aspects of Nursi is his remarkable confidence on the way that he presents topics. He doesn't say qala or qila. It said somebody said, somebody did this. He says this is this. It's so clear about faith issues. He says the problem of the modern world is faith, iman. You cannot go to paradise without iman. Iman is the essential elements in human life, faith, because it is the foundation. And that's why he called his books Haqaiqul Imaniyya, the truth of faith. And people in the early time, he says, in the time of, let's say, Islamic history, early Islamic history, people would go to a cave and spend 40 years in a cave to get knowledge of Haqiqatullah, or knowledge of Allah. That was tasawwuf. It is good, it's wonderful, but Nursi says that way is no longer possible. You cannot go and stay in a cave for 40 years. So he said, I ask Allah to give a way for modern human beings. Their time is very short, and they need right answer at the right time. And Allah has inspired me with these books. It's called the Treatises of Light. And that's why I think what he wrote is addressing the needs of our modern society, the needs of our modern human beings, not only Muslims. I would say non-Muslims even can benefit from Nursi's writings. He speaks about the concept of afterlife, the concept of the purpose of life, but in a very convincing way. He said, I have not said anything that I could not prove it. And that's his methodology, because he says, in modern day, people are the people of reason. They use their reason. You cannot say something to people without any acceptable reasoning. So he says, alhamdulillah, all haqaiqul iman that I mentioned are accepted by the reason as well. So I explained in a way that is actually reason is accepting. And that brings people to have a strong faith, because he says taqlidi and tahqiqi iman are totally different. Iman taqlidi in this century is not enough. I believe because my mother believed. Well, that's very good, but it's not enough. He says, I believe because my father believed. One day, a philosopher's idea will come to you. You will read a book and you will really lose your faith. So you should have iman tahqiqi, the iman that is based on proofs. I believe so strongly that there is life after this life. 100%. It's not 95%, 99%, 100%. That is Nursi's view. And that is why he says, such an iman, if you have that level of tahqiq, hundreds of philosophers, atheist ideas will not be able to shake that faith, because that is so much strong and so much based on proofs that is actually convincing your mind and your heart. And I think that's why Nursi writings are very important for our century. Iman and Iman and Iman. He says faith, faith, faith.
I have someone, I think it's a comment. The person said, Ustad Nursi brought together the information in his book. He gathered it from Kalam books. What do you think about that? I think
it is very good question. Yes, Nursi says, my books are considered modern kalam, not classical kalam. He actually criticized the classical kalam a little bit. He says, may Allah bless them. May Allah be pleased with them. They have done a great job. Like Imam al-Ghazali also criticized kalam. Nursi says, Nursi praises them. Not unlike Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Ghazali actually, to a certain extent, attacks them. He says, you talk too much about God, but you don't know God.
Well, thank you. I think Brother Muhammad Hassan has a question. If you want to ask him directly.
Yes, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Prof.Zeki, for a nice presentation about Sayyid Nursi and his life. I have two questions actually, but I'll ask one because I'll give time for others. If I get time, then I'll ask the other one. You mentioned in difference about Nursi's life and influence and how he wrote this Risale-e-Nur briefly. But I heard two things. One is one of the scholars from Indian subcontinent, which sometimes called it Imam Rabbani or Mujaddid al-Fitani, got a great influence in his life. And another is Abdul Qadir Jilani. I heard this Futwatul Ghaib from Abdul Qadir Jilani and Imam Rabbani, Mujaddid al-Fitani's life actually made him from old Nursi to new Nursi. Has there any light about this Indian subcontinent, Mujaddid al-Fitani and Abdul Qadir Jilani?
Yes, that's a very good question. For both of them, actually, Nursi has reference. For Imam Rabbani, he says, I was looking for getting a direction, a right direction. So I was looking for various sources. Many good scholars were attracting me in the beginning of his life, the beginning of the life of Nursi. And he says, I found Imam Rabbani's book, Mujaddid al-Fitani, the second millennium Mujaddid, Imam Rabbani, Ahmed Sarhandi. And somehow, in his Mektubat, Imam Rabbani's Mektubat, I just open it And I found a letter says, the letter to Bediuzzaman. Oh, I said, Imam Rabbani is talking to me then, probably. I didn't know that there was a person named named Bediuzzaman in the time of Imam Rabbani. So I opened the letter, and Imam Rabbani says, make your Qibla one, Tawheedi Qibla. And I said, well, Imam Rabbani is addressing me actually. I got my lesson. I got my lesson from Imam Rabbani. Tawheedi Qibla. What is Tawheedi Qibla? Make only one source for you. That is the Quran. And then I started to focus on the Quran. And that's why he says, Imam Rabbani was addressing me. I got my lesson. Probably the situation of Bediuzzaman of his time was similar to the situation of me. And therefore, that lesson was for that Bediuzzaman and also for me. And he says, from that on, I started to look at the methodology of Imam Rabbani. And Imam Rabbani's methodology is focusing on the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He always prefers the Sunnah of the Prophet over the practice of Tasawwuf. The practice of Sufism is good, but Imam Rabbani says, whenever I would look during Sayr Suluk, I would look, the things that have Sunnah in it are shining like stars in comparison to other paths. And therefore, Imam Rabbani is very unique with that regard, as Nursi calls him my teacher. So it is true, Brother Muhammad is absolutely right. Imam Rabbani is known, Bediuzzaman says, Imam Rabbani is my teacher. And he actually addressed me, and then I changed my path to one Qibla, and that is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he used Imam Rabbani. He mentions him in his book Al-Maktubat, and also in his brief biography of his life as well.
Thank you for that. We have one.
Yeah, with regard to Shaykh Al-Jailani, again, Bediuzzaman says, I read Imam Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jailani's book called Futuh Al-Ghayb. I read it, and I read it as it was addressing me. And he says, it actually cured many of the diseases of my heart. So again, Abdul Qadir Al-Jailani is again one of his teachers, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's teachers. Yeah, thank you, Brother Muhammad, for reminding this.
We got a question from Sister Haidar. She says, Assalamu alaikum. Firstly, thank you for your presentation, excellent presentation. Would you explain in another time his conception of education? Did anyone, I think what she's trying to say, did anyone continue with his university? So was there anyone carrying on after World War I, where the conception of that university he had? Did anyone, I know?
Yes, that project, I think that project ended with the First World War. But Nursi says my books became a university, like an open university. When in modern Turkey, there was a university established in Eastern Anatolia, and Nursi said, inshallah, this university, I think it is called Atatürk University now, in Erzurum, in Eastern Anatolia. Nursi said, inshallah, this university will serve one of the goals that I had for that university. They like to make kind of reconciliation that, we established a university in Eastern Anatolia, and Nursi was aiming to establish a university there. So inshallah, he says that university eventually will serve that purpose. But there are many educational institutions around the world. Now, I would say, to a certain extent, following the teaching of Nursi, maybe in Turkey, outside of Turkey. So that university per se ended, but the philosophy is continuing, alhamdulillah.
I actually have two more questions, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Perhaps is quite important. To understand Nursi's place in Islamic intellectual intellectual activities. What was his really? I know Shaykh Nursi has a Sufi approach to Islam, sophistical approach to Islam. What role did he play in terms of promoting Hadith literature within Turkey and his students? And how much was he involved with the classical understanding of Islam and Islamic, say, Islamic Aqidah, and how it is represented within the classical books of Islamic Aqidah? So how did he combine that with his, Sufi approach?
Yeah, that's very good point, Brother Abdul Hai. What I see in Nursi's writings, he really very well versed in the classical Islamic sources, very well versed in the Hadith, in the commentary of the Quran, and I think that's why memorizing 80 books in the classical Islamic sources is not an easy task. He uses many of them in his writings. Like one of the books that he wrote, later translated as Usul al-Hadith. He wrote actually a book on that. There are many hadith that are misunderstood, and Nursi explains them and the methodology that is used in that hadith. So that hadith should be understood. If we have time, I mean, the 24th word in the book, the words, this treatise is basically about hadith and how hadith should be understood, and how some hadiths that are understood as exaggeration, but actually Nursi said it is not exaggeration. It is like there is a hadith, let's say, about a recitation of Qul Huwallahu Ahad. How can this be? 1/3 of the Quran, one recitation of Qul Huwallahu Ahad is 1/3 of the Quran. Nursi explains this methodologically. So one Islamic scholar who translated Nursi's book into Arabic named this book as Usul al-Hadith. It's actually about usul. So I would say he is very well versed in the classical Islamic sources, but he didn't stop that. He also studied modern sciences. He was very well known in logic. He wrote a book on logic, actually, Aristotle logic, that was traditionally studied at the madrasa system. Madrasa system would called al-mantiq. So Nursi wrote a book on that. That book is lost, unfortunately, during one of the, I think during one of the earthquake in the city that he used to be, and that book was lost. The book couldn't find. So he had many those things as well in modern science, in modern understandings. He says, I read all Western philosophers. I can challenge all Western philosophers about faith, and I cannot prove them. I can prove them that this is the right one. I read them, and then I wrote something even on those subjects. For example, his book, The Treatise of Nature, he's exactly responding those naturalism philosophy. It's nature does by itself. Nature is the creator. And Nursi proves that nature cannot be the creator. Nature is an art, not the artist. As he says, nature is the art of God, not the artist. You are confusing the art and the artist, And then he gives examples, beautifully explaining the Treatise of Nature is remarkable. And he says, when I went to the Ottoman Empire, to Istanbul, and visit the parliament, I realized that there was an idea of irreligiosity spreading among Muslims. And I said, well, I will write a response to that. And then I wrote my book, Risalatul Tabi'ah, I wrote in Arabic, but the people who would read Arabic were few. So then I needed to write in Turkish. And then he wrote in Turkish. And then he addressed the situation of people, those who are promoting naturalism as a philosophy in contrast to faith. So he promotes that nature is misunderstood. You actually misunderstanding nature. Nature is not the artist. Nature is the art of the artist.
On that note, Barakallah fi Ustaz Zeki for your presentation and shedding light on the life and the work of Bediuzzaman. I am very much grateful to you for responding and presenting on Shaykh Nursi rahimahullah ta'ala. Please stay in touch with ILS. Visit the website, which is www.islamicliterarysociety.com. We are calling people to write book reviews, articles. Feel free to email us info@islamicliterarysociety.com. Get involved. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده، إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب.